This is Nick Allen coming to you live with Better Together on a very special Friday here. Again, for those that are tuned in for the first time, Better Together is a Facebook page and YouTube channel that really focuses on people working together to make things better here in Mesa County and Grand Junction in particular. So today, we're very excited to have with us City Council member Ben Van Dyke. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. And my first question to you starts from the beginning. Why did you decide to run?
I over the last couple of years kind of started getting more and more involved in some of the conversation going on around our community about, different things, downtown Grand Junction, impact fees, lots of different conversations. And I just kept seeing an undercurrent, a tone that our community came forward, expressed their concerns, their feelings about a project or something happening in our community, and that it just never really seemed to land with leadership locally. And the more I got involved, the more of these conversations I had, the more I recognized, there was strength in numbers, and that these groups coming forward, their voice carried a lot more weight than these individuals.
Mm,
But it seems really important to me too that we listen to people at the individual level so that it doesn't require this massive movement of people to come forward once it's reached this boiling point. So it's how can we get out ahead of these things sooner on and have these conversations earlier to kind of diffuse them and find solutions that work best for the community, or at least let them know we're listening. There are situations where it's there's not going to be a winner.
right.
There's a lot of gray area. It's even Fourth and Fifth Street. I don't think anybody felt you know completely satisfied with what they got from that. But oftentimes it feels like those are when we've reached the best decisions, when
Mm,
everybody got a little of what they wanted. Everybody kind of lost a little bit, but we can all walk away feeling good about how we compromised. So
right. Right.
yeah.
I love hearing that. I mean, it's so important. I think you really mapped it out well of making sure we still take in consideration just those individuals that come to council because they can represent a lot of folks that maybe don't know how to get in touch with their government or just are afraid to, shy, what have you. So you're
Uh,
right.
Well, and not only that, but busy. I mean,
Hmm.
life is extremely busy in this world today. I mean, most people don't have that much downtime, especially, you get people with families, they're running between practices, events, band
Right.
drop off, back home, back to work, all around, saying, "Hey, come out on Wednesday at 5:30 in the evening and make
Right.
the city council meeting and then wait to tell us how you feel over 3 minutes." It's not all that appealing. So
Hmm.
I think finding a way that we can, and I think this is really our role and our responsibility as council, is to make those contacts, to have those conversations with people far before they ever have to come to a council meeting, so that they don't feel obligated to necessarily take the time out of their evening with their family to make it out. Now, don't get me wrong, I love it when people come, but I also think the absolute best case scenario is eventually no one comes, because
Mm.
they don't feel like they have to come for 3 minutes of public comment. They can actually make a phone call or have coffee or have lunch and actually have the conversation that gives them a little more dialogue than a 3 minute a 3 minute, I mean, spilling of the heart and then moving
Yeah.
on to the next person. And most of these things are, I mean, one person that really stuck with me was listening to Amber Martinez's
Mm.
3 minute public comment. And it's to listen to something like that where someone's life has really been altered without having a lot of say in it.
Hmm.
And just hearing the pain in her voice and hearing her heart, I couldn't help but thinking that this wasn't the best way for us to be addressing Amber Martinez. These
Mm.
conversations should have been happening between council and Amber and city, and not that they weren't, but at a much more transparent and clear, much more transparent level than what actually happened with that situation. So finding ways that we actually can have those, and Cody and I sat and we had coffee with Amber Martinez
Right.
after that. And it was one of those deals where in a lot of ways it was too little too late,
Hmm.
but at least being able to sit down with them and hear their heart and hear their perspective and how, you know, we can look at things from an extremely legalistic point of view,
Sure.
but that's not always going to be the humane way of looking at it. We gotta have morals, ethics, and a legalistic view, and wrap those all into one. And I think that got missed a little bit in that situation. And so much of that had to do, I think, with change of leadership at the city and things being done
Hmm.
differently than they're done under Mike Bennett. I think in a lot of ways, Mike Bennett's going to be the magic pill for the city. Council can do so much and we can point in certain directions. But when it comes to culture within the city, that's Mike. Mike sets that. And he's got such a heart for it and such a way of listening and working with people that, I mean, city council aside, I'm so optimistic about the direction the city's moving in under Mike's leadership. I mean, I think we're really incredibly lucky to have him.
Yeah, I know it was a big deal to get him, and he's had a great pedigree coming out of Fruta. So I'm excited to see more of that. Kind of speaking of weighing the like human element with the legal element and values, how do you go about like when you have a big decision set up in front of you, and we can take, the Fourth and Fifth Street example, or any example that you would like to choose, but how do you determine your vote? What kind of goes into figuring out how you're going to approach something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it differs a lot from one vote to another. I mean, because there are situations like this group housing situation where we're limited legally. So
Hmm.
we have to look at that first from a or legal scope, excuse me,
Yeah.
before we can look at it from a humanitarian scope, because we just can't make the city extremely susceptible to lawsuits. I mean,
Hmm.
it just we can't afford to operate that way. And just on a base level, looking at things with Fourth and Fifth Street, so much of that was the community input during the campaign. So many of the people I spoke with I heard a lot about the Ballards. I heard a lot about downtown visitorship. I heard a lot about negative impacts, about it being confusing, and all these different things that were really affecting the downtown businesses. And those were the voices that I was hearing the most of. And I think with most problems, you're typically going to hear from the people that are having the negative effect a lot more than you're going to hear from the people that are having the positive effect.
Right.
So when we started hearing all that, our thought was, hey, the community does not want this. They're pushing back against it. It's very clear that this is the voice and this is what our community wants. So that was my perspective of originally really wanting the vote to turn it back. Um, Moving forward with that, once it became public that we were going to turn it back, the people that really kind of touched my heart from there weren't the ones that came out to tell us, you fools, what are you doing? It was the ones that came out and said, hey, I've gotten to know neighbors in my neighborhood that I have never spoken with before because it's so quiet and peaceful. Or I feel comfortable with my kids going to the park on their own now. I would have never let that happen before. One couple talked about the amount of car accidents that they had end up in their front lawn and how
Hmm.
since the pilot project started, they hadn't had any of that. And initially going into it, my feeling on that section was more along the lines of, hey, you don't buy a house next to the interstate and expect traffic to move or noise to stop. Like that's kind of where you moved and what you should expect. I think the difference in this situation was we gave it to them.
Sure.
We improved their life for over a year, and then we're going to pull that rug out from under them. It's a lot different than just saying, like, no, this is how it's always been. We
Hmm.
get it. It's not ideal. It's no, we made it better for you. We solved your problems. Then we've decided that this other segment is more important than you. And the more we spoke about it, it really became very clear that the neighborhood and the businesses were having completely different conversations about how the things were affecting them. And we heard this north of Grand, it's hey, speed, uh, the amount of racers, it's really reducing that speed through there that's been so beneficial for the neighborhoods. And then we hear from, the south of Grand area that it's confusing, it's
Hmm.
hard for people to navigate, parking's not great, all these different things. But we just kept hearing like, wait, these are two very different problems. And once we were able to look at it as two very different problems, I think it really made a lot of sense for most of us that it's like, hey, we have an opportunity here to solve most people's issues instead of just focusing on one group or the other. Um, where we're at on that now, I'm not really sure
Sure.
because
Yeah, I know there's some more developments, right?
well, and I think the price I the price tag's going to be scary. I have a
Mm,
feeling with what they come back. We kind of didn't really anticipate as many curb cuts as what's going to be needed, as
mm,
well as I mean, there's some trees that are probably going to have to be removed, which gets into a really hairy area with the city and their trees because the city considers our trees a very very good asset.
yeah,
So
agreed.
it's very important. So when you're talking about removing mature landscaping, um, it gets into a hairy situation. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen with that still to this day.
Hmm.
I'm from what I've been told, we're going to have a presentation, I believe, in our next workshop about what it's going to cost to actually get that bike lane in there and how feasible it actually is. And maybe some, I don't know what all staff will bring to us, but also if it is extremely expensive, some some feasible alternatives that we can still find solutions to work for everybody. You know,
Right.
I I think the whole thing's become so politicized
Yeah.
that it's become such an us versus them thing. And that's not the way I look at it. I see Grand Junction as a bike community. I just think we have to do it extremely responsibly. And
Hmm.
I think when you get in this area of mandating bike infrastructure, I think it gets in the way of the actual, you know, idea of it all in the first place. It's, do we need to force bike lanes into every street, or could we be looking at removed bike lanes that are actually off street that I know, like with my children, I'd feel much more comfortable riding with my kids on a isolated bike lane removed from the street altogether, or even on a sidewalk than I will on a on-street bike lane. So it's just trying to find some solutions I think that are going to work for everyone. A real tough part of that too is we're going to be moving into a pretty tough fiscal years moving forward, and I think a lot of the fund money's dried up in a lot of ways
Sure.
between, the state budget, federal budget, and all these things that are happening on a higher level than us. We're just going to have to be more responsible moving forward to make sure that I think we're really covering our core services first before we can kind of look outside that realm on some of
Hmm.
the more fun stuff, which
Right.
doesn't mean there won't be a time where we're back to the fun stuff again. It's just kind of this economic outlook for the near future. I think more really the next 2 years.
Yeah. I think that's definitely stuff that we're seeing. Yeah, I think from what it sounds like, you really look to unpack these issues, not just taking them necessarily at face value, but really seeing for, the example you gave, it was two very different problems going on. And in mentioning just the future of the city, let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about the strategic plan. I know that's really been coming out lately in the news, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the process and what's coming out of it.
Yeah, I'm honestly really excited. I think we had a lot of forward momentum in our strategic planning retreat, just really focusing on that whole getting back to the basics, making sure that we are really staffing our police adequately, making sure that we don't have, fire stations that are being built that we can't afford to staff,
Right.
things like this to really make sure that we're covering those core services well. And, something I had mentioned during strategic planning that I think might have been taken incorrectly by staff, and I feel bad for it still. was, I said we strive for average at everything. And
Mm,
I think staff took that as, they shoot for the middle, where I meant it from you all have such a wide scope and so much work on your plate that the best you could possibly ever hope to do is average because you can't really focus on anything.
right.
So I think reducing that scope, giving staff the ability to really narrow in, focus on the projects that are a priority of our community. Something we had talked about a lot during the strategic planning was, during the last comprehensive plan, there was supposed to be a priority matrix that was implemented into city projects that would essentially tell staff like this is where we find the priorities and this is how we need to knock down the list. Um, I've heard mixed things about where Fourth and Fifth Street actually fell on
I
that
heard
matrix.
number 58 was
Yeah, exactly. So it's making sure that we really prioritize those things correctly within that matrix and knock out the things that are most essential and most wanted by our community.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great. One thing that I've heard about, and I know our members at Better Together have really been interested on, and we're going to dive deeper into it, but housing following under one of those really core issues. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Why did that come up as part of a
Yeah.
core issue and your thoughts on it?
It's funny. It's everybody that we talk to that is in the construction process or the planning process in Grand Junction has real concerns about some of the hurdles that it takes to get through the planning process. Um, Part of our Proposition 123 funding was that we brought an expert in to review our planning process. And what the expert came up with was that essentially we are manned well enough in the department. The problem we're having is that our application process is overly complicated and we're not guiding our builders through the process well enough so that they're equipped to have all the information they need to push them through the process faster. So I keep talking to different builders that say, you have great people.
Hmm.
The planning department's great. It's not the people within the planning department. The issue comes down to an overcomplex code and unnecessary burdens for the planners having little to no discretion to make decisions that kind of bend the code or vary slightly in certain areas. The code can be so rigid that then it funnels everything up through the head planners into the legal department and just really slows down the process. So that's kind of one of the reasons we brought this housing affordability task force. We're bringing them together is a lot of them are industry experts that have gone through the planning process a ton. They know the planners, they've done it, they know the roadblocks and the hurdles that they can bring to us and say, hey, these are where our inefficiencies lie. These are where the extra costs lie. These are where we can speed up the process to actually make it to where we can build more cost effectively. I,
Hmm.
uh, I spoke with somebody yesterday. I'm not sure if he'd want me to say his name. So, but
That's fine.
a local community leader that runs one of the bigger businesses in Grand Junction that was talking about their next facility and how they're going out to Fruta because the cost to build it in Grand Junction is so much higher
Mm,
because all the different steps and all of our different zoning roadblocks that make it so much more difficult. So they're going out to Fruta to build a facility out there. So it's removing those roadblocks so that we can compete with the communities around us like Montrose, Fruta, Delta. Was at a Chamber of Commerce event recently, and somebody from the chamber was telling me that when Montrose speaks to prospective businesses, the first thing that they tell the businesses is the best reason for doing business with Montrose is Grand Junction. So, and and I think, and this comes back also to Mike. I can be negative on the past, but we're we're as a whole organization really trying to clean these things up now and move
mhm.
forward as well. So it's really easy for me to kind of go back and dwell on like where we weren't doing well instead of focusing on how we can do better.
Right.
Where I think that's such a strong point with Mike, where he's like, hey guys, like the past is the past. things have happened. It is what it is. How do we move forward? You know,
Exactly.
because we can sit and we can attack each other and tear each other up over previous things that can happen, or we can look forward and find some common ground. So I think that's going to be a strong place for Mike there.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I've had that advice given to me too. It's like, we could still, argue back and forth, but that's not getting it done. It's not moving things forward. So another touch just on the housing front. So kind of just developing or like redesigning, codes and structures. I think that's great. That makes sense. Where do you think the city plays when the overall profit, incentive really is to build bigger? It's those larger homes that you can kind of add on, which will allow you to increase the price point versus those smaller homes, starter homes, homes like I have, that, a developer might not make as much money off of just in general.
Absolutely.
How do you balance that?
So something we have recently just talked about in workshop and actually voted on Wednesday was we're increasing some of the tiers for the fee forgiveness for affordable housing. So we're going to be going up to 120% that those builders can essentially get 50% of their fees back. I believe it's between 100 and 120%. They can
Okay.
qualify for a 50% reduction in their fees, which can make a real difference and really incentivize those builders to build at that price point. The thing that I think we're going to have to really dig into that deep is that oftentimes there has to be a long-term affordability aspect tied to that property. Then once that fee's been waived, uh,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times that's talked about through things like deed restrictions,
Mm-hmm.
which I am adamantly against a deed restriction.
Okay.
I don't believe that we should tell people within our community that we want them in our community, we want them to work in our community. We don't believe they can own a home in our community.
Mm.
Uh, and I think when you get into that area of deed restricting things, it takes away that opportunity to build future wealth for their family, to move up into their next home. It really takes that transition aspect out of the picture. Something I've talked about with Laurel a lot is how Habitat for Humanity does their equity release. And instead of having a long-term deed restriction on the property, they're doing like a 5% a year equity release. So
Sure.
if a person's lived in that home for 5 years, they can at least have the money to move up into their next home. And me personally, home ownership has put me in the position that I'm in today. You know,
Hmm.
I bought my first house for $112,000 in Grand Junction, down on 23rd and Year A downtown. And unfortunately, these younger kids in our, not even kids, people in our community aren't
Yeah.
going to be have that benefit anymore. So I think so much of what we can do is to make sure, you know, we can push all the buttons in the world to say we're going to affect housing affordability. I think before we do that, we have to actually look at how we're affecting the cost of homes.
Sure.
If there's something we're doing that's driving up the cost, before we can tell other people how to fix the problem, we have to fix our process within to actually reduce the costs so that if builders can build more affordably, they will. I know quite a few people in the building world, and I actually used to be an electrician,
Hmm.
and I know oftentimes builders find themselves a niche. You have a niche, a lot. Sometimes they're the $600,000 to $800,000 house. Sometimes it's going to be that $400,000 house. But if we make it where a builder can find a niche actually building a $300,000 house, I mean, they will do it. I mean, I can guarantee that because as a subcontractor, I oftentimes was cut on my price by somebody willing to do the job cheaper. And
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of how the free market's going to control that. So I think getting to a point where we aren't affecting the cost before we look outside to actually start making, you know, land acquisitions or get into
Hmm.
the development world. You know, I keep seeing these different housing projects that are done by different municipalities, and every time I see it done, I see that their restrictions and oftentimes the grants that they've applied for to build this type of housing cause so many restrictions in building that the cost of construction rises so much that it's no longer affordable once it hits the marketplace because it's
Mm,
cost 400,000. But
mm,
actually reducing the restrictions, not in a way of building code or safety code. I'm talking about sidewalk width and offsets and just the little things that add a ton of cost and time. You know, one of the developers I was speaking with yesterday was talking about the time it's taken him to go through the process and how he had to purchase the land beforehand, and that he's just paying interest on that money as this sits in the planning process.
right.
And he talked about it's daily accrued interest, and that every single day the house is getting more expensive
Mm,
as it sits in the
mm,
planning process because
mhm,
his margins changing, so his margins shifting up with that scale. So how do we get things through the planning process, get them built, and really be open for business to improve the stock and find a more affordable product, a single family more affordable product. I love the apartments, but I'm still Grand Junction is a single family home with a backyard community.
sure.
And the more we can do that and the more we can have single family homes for people in our community, as well as apartments for people that want to be in apartments as
Mhm.
well. We're not telling people how to live, but just having the stock so that we can, not as a government control the price, but as the market can have a little more control on the price.
Mhm. For sure. Well, I appreciate all those thoughts, and I know it's going to be, I'm glad to see it in the strategic plan. I know it's going to be an ongoing discussion, ongoing work. So, would love to stay in contact around that. I know our members at Better Together would too. Um, love that equity release. That's really interesting. We'll talk to Laurel about that too.
He's
So,
sharp on housing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I think she's awesome to have on
she's a
council for
master.
this moment.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree.
just to wrap, Ben, one thing we really encourage here on the channel is people running for office. We think that, every office should have hopefully multiple candidates to give voters choice. And you talked about why you ran, but what was it like to run? Just to give people kind of a crash. Don't scare them too much, right? But,
It's a roller coaster. The municipal election, it's interesting because it's a much shorter process than most
mhm,
people that are running for office. You get senators where it's a 2 year campaigning process where we're doing it all in 3 to 6 months.
mhm,
So it is compact and it is intense. It's a lot of fun. It's also great exercise in public speaking, and it will challenge you to think in a different way than you've ever thought before. um, it's fun. We'd get asked the same questions by 20 people, and then number 21 would just ask the most off the wall question, and it would throw such a wrench in everything because I haven't thought about that. Like
right.
that's not part of like where I've been. So give me a minute and let me process that information. Um, advice. If you have a spouse, make sure your spouse is on board early, and make sure they're supported. That was one thing with two young kids is my wife has taken on so much extra. So finding ways that I can support her anytime I can, I really try to do. um, I'm not doing enough, but I still
It's,
try to I'm
right.
still trying to find that time every time I can get to be home to relieve her, to kind of give her that sanity as well, because
Mhm.
it's without her I wouldn't be able to do any of this. So it makes it kind of tough on that front. Sorry, my daughter's peeking in.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
No, you're exactly right, and that's how I coach people too. Um,
Oh, sorry.
I got both of them nice.
We
Yeah.
got family in town.
Oh, sure.
We're celebrating my 1 year old's first birthday
Oh
tomorrow.
my
So
God.
yeah,
Okay, I didn't know
so
you
we
had
got
such a little one.
yeah,
Okay, that's
we have
awesome.
1 and 4, so they're the best, and
Okay.
they're a big reason for my why as well. Growing up in Grand Junction, like I love this community. It was
Mhm.
the sense of community here is a lot different than it is in most places. We travel to see different family members in different communities, and oftentimes my wife and I all look at each other weird because it's like, that person walked by us and they didn't smile. They didn't wave, or like they look kind of rude, or
Right.
like, and it's like, that's not Grand Junction. Like, it's the sense of community, how friendly people are, how willing people are to come together. It's a really special place. So making sure that we preserve that for our kids as well is so important to me.
Yeah.
We're gonna grow, but how can we stay a small town?
Right.
How can we have those small town values as we turn into a city? You
Right.
know,
Right.
so having the ability to be part of that is it's a real honor. And it's probably the best part of the whole thing.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben. I think that's a great way to wrap it. So we appreciate it a ton, and would love to have you on again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in the future as we just see more of this play out. So thank you
Yeah.
again.
Thanks for what you do. I think it's so great that we have so many people in our community that are getting engaged, are active in politics, that actually know what's going on with the community. I mean, that's powerful in itself. The fact that we have people like you doing this, you are a conduit to those people that can't break away for a 5:30 meeting. So
Right.
it's really important that we do this, and we do it often. So
Great. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm seeing it. All right. I'll let you go. Have a great
thanks.
rest of your day.
You as well. Thank you so much. Have a good one,
See ya.
everyone.
Okay, well, that was Ben Van Dyke, council member. He's on day 73 of being a council member, I believe. So, congratulations to him. Thank you all for joining us today. And we're actually on our way right now. I'm going to go get an interview with Mesa County Compass. The ladies there will be putting that on YouTube and releasing it when they're ready to. And next Tuesday, we're very excited to have our town hall with the Mayor Cody Kennedy and Mayor Pro Tem Laurel Cole. That's going to be at 6 o'clock. If I'm saying that wrong, you can check it. But that's going to be on Tuesday night. Would love for you to join. Send us your chats. It's a live conversation with two city leaders, and it's an awesome opportunity for voters and residents just to get engaged. So this was Better Together. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.